The German sailors on the destroyer below looked up and actually laughed. They could see this ridiculous aircraft approaching. It looked like something from the First World War, 25 years out of date. Their anti-aircraft guns were designed to track fighters moving at 350 miles per hour. This thing was barely moving at all. They opened fire anyway, and missed. The shells that should have torn Esmonde's aircraft apart screamed past on either side. The gunners overcorrected, unable to track something moving so slowly. Esmonde held his approach, steady, straight. He watched the destroyer's bow through his simple iron sights. At 800 yards, he released his Torpedo. The 18-foot weapon dropped from beneath his fabric-covered fuselage, splashed into the frigid Norwegian water, and began its run. 30 seconds later, the destroyer's hull split open. Esmonde banked away, already looking for his next target. By the time the sun set, his squadron of obsolete biplanes would sink 12 German ships. The aircraft they called the Stringbag, a joke about how outdated it was about to become the most successful ship killer of the entire war. The Fairey Swordfish looked ridiculous, there's no other way to describe it. In an age of sleek metal monoplanes with enclosed cockpits and retractable landing gear, the Swordfish was a relic. 2 wings stacked on top of each other, connected by a forest of struts and wires. A fixed undercarriage that hung below the fuselage like dangling legs. An open cockpit that exposed the crew to wind, rain, and freezing temperatures. The fabric covering rippled in flight. The engine coughed and sputtered. The maximum speed was barely faster than a modern car on a highway. When the Swordfish entered service with the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm in 1936, it was already obsolete. By 1940, it was a joke. Pilots from other squadrons mocked the Swordfish crews mercilessly. "Going flying, are you? Or are you taking the laundry out to dry? Careful the wind doesn't blow you backward. If you need a tow, just wave." The nickname Stringbag wasn't a term of affection. It was mockery, a reference to the old-fashioned string shopping bags that housewives used. Something outdated, something your grandmother might carry. The pilots who flew them felt the sting. They were naval aviators, the elite. But they flew aircraft that looked like they belonged in an aviation museum. What nobody understood, not yet, was that every supposed weakness of the Swordfish was actually a hidden strength. The Swordfish was slow, embarrassingly, absurdly slow, but that slowness created advantages that faster aircraft couldn't match. First, the anti-aircraft problem. German and Italian warships were equipped with sophisticated fire control systems. Their guns could track fast-moving aircraft, calculating lead angles and firing patterns based on speed. The Swordfish was so slow that these systems couldn't compensate properly. The shells consistently flew ahead of the aircraft, missing by yards. Gunners trained to hit fighters moving at 300+ miles per hour literally couldn't adjust to something moving at 90 knots. One German gunnery officer would later write in his report, "The aircraft moved so slowly that our automatic tracking systems were useless. We were forced to aim manually, and even then the slow speed made lead calculation nearly impossible. The technology designed to kill aircraft was useless against something so primitive." Second, the low-speed handling. The Swordfish could fly, or and fight, in conditions that grounded modern aircraft. High winds, heavy rain, near-zero visibility, pitching carrier decks in stormy seas. Its slow speed meant it could take off and land in distances that would kill faster planes. A carrier pitching in heavy seas was a death trap for monoplanes. For the Swordfish, it was just another Tuesday. Third, the payload. Despite its ancient appearance, the Swordfish could carry an 18-inch torpedo, 1,070 pounds of ship-killing ordnance. Or it could carry bombs, depth charges, mines, or rockets. The old biplane could haul more weapons than many aircraft twice its size. Fourth, the survivability. When bullets hit the Swordfish, they passed through the fabric wings without causing significant damage. There was no hydraulic system to rupture, no pressurized fuel lines to ignite. The aircraft was so simple that it could absorb punishment that would have destroyed a modern fighter. One Swordfish returned from a mission with over 100 bullet holes in its wings. The crew patched the fabric with tape. and flew again the next day. The aircraft that everyone mocked was actually perfectly designed for one thing: killing ships. Here's what the modern aircraft designers forgot. They built planes to fight other planes, speed against speed, technology against technology. Nobody built a plane to fight ships. The Swordfish wasn't obsolete. It was specialized. And when it finally met the enemy fleet, that specialization would prove devastating. Germany invaded Norway with overwhelming force. The Kriegsmarine sent destroyers, cruisers, and supply ships to support the ground assault. The Royal Navy scrambled to intercept. The Fleet Air Arm was ordered to attack German shipping in Narvik Fjord. The problem was the weather. Norway in April was brutal. Snow squalls, freezing rain, visibility measured in yards. Modern fighters couldn't operate. Their high stall speeds made landing on pitching carriers suicidal. Their instruments iced over, their engines choked on the cold. But the Swordfish could fly. Lieutenant Commander Esmonde led his squadron from HMS Furious into conditions that grounded every other aircraft in the theater. They flew through snow so thick that pilots navigated by glimpses of the coastline. They climbed over mountains with ice forming on their wings. They descended into fjords so narrow that one wrong turn meant death against granite walls. When they found the German convoy, the enemy was completely unprepared. The destroyers had positioned themselves for defense against modern aircraft, spread out to maximize anti-aircraft coverage, guns elevated for high-speed targets. The Swordfish came in at 50 feet, so low they left wakes in the water. The German gunners tried to depress their weapons. Many couldn't. The guns were physically unable to aim at something flying that low and slow. Esmonde's first torpedo struck a destroyer amidships. The explosion broke the ship's back. His wingman hit a supply ship loaded with ammunition. The secondary explosion was visible for miles. Within 30 minutes, the Swordfish had sunk 4 German ships and damaged 3 more. Losses: 0 aircraft. The slow, obsolete biplane had just delivered the most devastating Fleet Air Arm attack of the war so far. Esmonde's success at Narvik was just the beginning. Over the next 2 days, Swordfish squadrons from multiple carriers launched continuous attacks against German shipping. They flew in conditions that kept every other aircraft grounded. They struck convoys that thought themselves safe under the cover of bad weather. The tactics evolved through combat experience. Pilots learned to approach through valleys, using terrain to mask their approach until the last possible moment. They learned to attack from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming the German gunners' ability to track targets. They learned to aim for the waterline, the torpedo's sweet spot. Too high and the explosion might not breach the hull. Too low, and the torpedo might pass underneath. One pilot, Lieutenant William "Willie" Palmer, developed a technique so audacious it seemed suicidal. He would approach the target ship head-on, aiming directly at the bow. At the last moment, sometimes less than 500 yards, he would release his torpedo and pull up hard, passing directly over the ship's mast. The head-on approach made him impossible to hit. The German guns couldn't track something coming straight at them. By the time they adjusted, Palmer was already over them and banking away. Using this technique, Palmer personally sank 3 ships in a single day. When he landed, his observer counted bullet holes in the fuselage. There were 7. None had hit anything vital. "Fabric doesn't care about bullets," Palmer said. By the end of the second day, the Swordfish squadrons had sunk 12 German ships and damaged over a dozen more. The Stringbag had become the most feared weapon in the Norwegian campaign. The Swordfish's finest hour came a year later, May 1941. The German battleship Bismarck, the most powerful warship in the Atlantic, had broken into the shipping lanes. She had already sunk HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, killing over 1,400 men. The entire Royal Navy was hunting her. But Bismarck was fast. She was pulling away from her pursuers. Within hours, she would reach the protection of German air cover and escape. One hope remained. HMS Ark Royal, a carrier trailing the chase, launched her Swordfish. The conditions were atrocious. 40-foot waves, gale-force winds, visibility measured in hundreds of yards. The carrier's deck was pitching so violently that aircraft were being thrown into the air during takeoff. Modern aircraft couldn't fly in this. The swordfish took off anyway. 15 swordfish climbed into the storm. They flew through rain so heavy it was like flying underwater. Ice formed on their wings. Pilots could barely see their own propellers. They found the Bismarck through sheer determination and luck. The German anti-aircraft guns opened fire. The sky filled with explosions. Shell fragments tore through fabric wings. But the swordfish were too slow, too low, too primitive for the fire control systems to track. They pressed their attack. Most torpedoes missed or failed to detonate against the battleship's armored belt. But one torpedo, dropped by a crew whose names are still debated by historians, struck Bismarck's stern. It hit the rudder. The massive battleship, 50,000 tons of armor and guns, was suddenly unable to steer. She could only sail in circles while the Royal Navy closed in. The next morning, the fleet caught up. The Bismarck was pounded into wreckage and scuttled by her own crew. The mightiest battleship in the German Navy had been crippled by a canvas biplane that looked like it belonged in 1918. The swordfish continued to hunt throughout the war. In the Mediterranean, swordfish from Malta attacked Italian convoys so effectively that supply runs became suicidal missions. The Italian Navy lost dozens of ships to the Stringbag. In the Atlantic, swordfish equipped with radar hunted German submarines at night. They would detect a U-boat on the surface, drop flares, and attack with depth charges or rockets before the submarine could dive. They escorted convoys through the most dangerous waters in the world. They flew from merchant ships converted to improvised carriers. They operated in conditions that would have grounded any other aircraft. By the end of the war, the Fairey Swordfish had sunk more Axis shipping than any other Allied aircraft, more than the modern bombers, more than the sleek torpedo planes that replaced it, more than aircraft that cost 10 times as much to build. The final count was staggering. Over 300 submarines and ships sunk or damaged, hundreds of thousands of tons of enemy shipping sent to the bottom, all from a biplane that people called obsolete in 1936. The last Swordfish combat mission was flown in 1945, 9 years after the aircraft entered service. It outlasted the modern planes that were supposed to replace it. Why did the Swordfish succeed where modern aircraft failed? The answer lies in a principle that military planners consistently forget. Technology solves specific problems. When the problem changes, the technology becomes useless. German anti-aircraft systems were designed to kill fast aircraft. When confronted with something slow, they failed. Modern aircraft required perfect conditions. When conditions became imperfect, they stayed grounded. Complex machines broke down under stress. Simple machines kept flying. The Swordfish wasn't better than modern aircraft in any measurable specification. It was slower. It was more vulnerable on paper. It couldn't climb as high or dive as fast, but it could do the one thing that mattered: kill ships. Today, military planners still struggle, with this lesson. They build sophisticated weapon systems that work perfectly in laboratories and fail catastrophically in the field. They spend billions on technology that can't handle conditions outside the specifications. Meanwhile, simpler weapons, drones, improvised munitions, modified civilian equipment, prove devastatingly effective. The Swordfish lesson endures. Sometimes the outdated solution is the right solution. Sometimes the weapon everyone mocks is the weapon that wins the war. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmonde received the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor. He died in 1942, leading a swordfish attack against the German battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. His entire squadron was shot down. It was a desperate, doomed mission. But even in death, he proved what the Swordfish represented: courage over technology, determination over specifications, the willingness to fly into impossible odds with an aircraft that everyone said couldn't work. The sailors who mocked the Stringbag died on torpedoed ships. The pilots who flew it died heroes. The aircraft that looked like a joke became a legend. 12 ships in 2 days. 300 ships by war's end. The most successful torpedo bomber in history. All because someone ignored what the experts said was possible. All because they trusted a canvas biplane when the modern world said it was obsolete. Sometimes the oldest weapon is the deadliest, and sometimes the joke has the last laugh. If this story of obsolete genius and unexpected victory gripped you, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel uncovers the untold stories of World War II, the underestimated weapons, the mocked innovations, and the warriors who proved the experts wrong. Tap the bell so you never miss an upload, and drop a comment below. I want to know, would you have trusted the Stringbag or demanded a modern aircraft? Share this video with someone who appreciates real military history. And check out the video on screen right now for another story of unlikely weapons that changed the war. I'll see you in the next one.